Hey everyone, this week I'm doing another class tier list. This time I'm going to be covering the Arcanist class. Arcanist is an amazing class. It's personally one of my favorites, if not my favorite. It's a hard call, but in almost every run I love bringing an Arcanist, no matter which one. They all perform so strongly, they do so well, contribute so much to every single team comp that it you really can use any of them and they will benefit your team greatly. I know I really kind of say that for every tier list in the most part, but that's just kind of a credit to the devs and how well they designed so many of the characters so that so many of them feel impactful and useful. But if I were to rank the classes in terms of usefulness and impact and just how much of a difference you really feel when you bring them, Arcanist would definitely be close to the top, if not the top. Many of these heroes are Old Faith alignment, so if you really want to mess around with a lot of them, other than Ector, you do have to go with the Old Faith alignment. I do know that some players kind of have mixed feelings on this. They kind of wish they would have more chances to play with them with Christian alignments. Hopefully, with some updates, maybe Christians will get an extra Arcanist. I don't know. But I do like that there is a playstyle differentiation based on your alignment, where it's more magic focused if you go with Old Faith, and more sort of Crusader Knight if you go Christian. Now, a lot of the Arcanists have a very similar core in form of their hexes, so what really helps them stand them out are the extra abilities they get on top of that. Their primary role is debuffing support, putting a lot of debuffs on the enemies, weakening them, CCing them, while also providing strong secondary damage from range to soften up enemies. So these are going to be the sort of main factors that I'm looking at when I place them within the tier list. So when I say an S tier Arcanist, this basically just means, in my opinion, this Arcanist is amongst the best in the game, or if not the best in the game, when it comes to doing secondary damage dealing and crowd controlling the enemies. A tier means they fulfill these roles extremely well. They're definitely in the upper half of this bracket, and you're going to have a lot of fun using them. B tier, they're just a good Arcanist, they do their job well, but nothing really helps them stand out. And then C tier, there's something about them that really just kind of makes them fall behind the rest of their peers. I forgot to delete D tier before starting this video, so I'll just go ahead and do that now. Because like the rest of my tier list, there is no D tier. They're all good enough to not be considered a D tier. Also, there aren't that many characters, so it's hard to get a spread over that many tiers. Alright, so let's get into it. First up is going to be Sir Dagonet. He is the Old Faith Tyrant Arcanist. Now, Dagonet is probably the most debuff-oriented of the Arcanists. He doesn't really have much in the way of damage spells compared to the rest of his peers, but he does have Stigma, which is only shared with Mordred, and he has Desecrated Ground, which is a great AoE damage and slowing effect. His damage isn't particularly great without any specific gear. His damage actually can get really high, actually some of the highest out of the Arcanists, but that requires a very specific gear build for him, and I'm not evaluating potential gear builds on these characters. I'm just looking at their skill trees, because then that would put Ector and Merlin probably into S tier, because with burn builds they can actually function as primary DPS. So not everyone's going to get these items, so I don't think that's a fair comparison. Looking at Dagonet and just his skill tree, his damage is probably amongst the weakest, but his debuffing and his CC is amongst the highest. Desecrated Ground is great for this, and Stigma I think is a very strong debuff ability, especially with having such great range, 30% vulnerability with the upgrade. He can contribute a lot in this regard. So I do think he falls into A tier. The damage is a little bit of a problem, but I think he does compensate with the other role that you want to bring your Arcanist for. Moving on to Ector, the first Arcanist that you recruit in the game. He often gets ditched once you start to unlock these other Arcanists, because admittedly, his skill tree compared to the rest is a little lackluster. It's not quite as strong. The damage isn't quite as good, but he's still completely serviceable. And if you're doing a Christian run and you want to have a high loyalty Arcanist, I've used Ector under these circumstances, and I honestly have no complaints. He may not be as strong as his peers, but he's still perfectly strong and capable of holding his own. He does have access to some good AoE abilities in the form of Fire Blast, and I don't think Flame Wall is great. It does have its uses, and just the core of the Arcanist class overall is so good. He doesn't have anything that detracts from him that makes him weaker. I think he's a perfect example of a B tier. Third up is Faerie Knight, and honestly, this is a tough one. The Faerie Knight, you recruit in Act 3 as part of a story choice. You choose between either him or Gawain. And between the two, Faerie Knight is definitely the stronger choice. And he's a really cool choice. He's a really fun choice. He's very flexible. He's very different from the rest of the Arcanists. You sort of play him as like an assassin type character, or as a tanky kind of character, or off tank. He can do a lot of different things. He's sort of melee focused. He has 2 range on his melee strikes, which is really cool. There's just a lot of different stuff you can do with him, and because he's so different from the rest of the Arcanists, I don't really know where to put him. I have talked to a lot of players that swear by him. They love him. He's great. He's amazing. Personally, he's not my favorite. I don't think he's one of the best, but I do recognize he is still quite strong, and he does have a lot of flexibility and utility that he can offer that just other Arcanists can't. So I think I'm going to put him in A tier, actually. This one's kind of tough. I kind of struggle between A and B just because he doesn't really fit the kind of mold that I kind of use to measure the classes against each other. But like with Morgana in my Sage tier list, she was so different. I ended up putting her in S tier just because of what she did was so good, and what she did help her stand out. I do think Faerie Knight does stand out because what he does do is different. I don't think he does it to such an exemplary degree like Morgana does. I think I'm pretty comfortable putting him in A tier. There will probably be some people that say he should go in S, but for me, I think A is plenty fair. Now we reach Merlin, and I will just straight up put him in S tier. I don't think this is going to surprise anyone that has used him. Merlin is absolutely crazy. He has an extremely unique skill tree. He has a very similar playstyle to the rest of the Arcanists, bar Faerie Knight, but all of his skills are completely different. He doesn't have hexes, for one, but he still has lots of cheap debuffing CC spells, just like the more classical Arcanist. It's just in the form of Raven Swarm, Mind Fog, Illusion, Teleport, and he still has offensive spells like Fire Drake and Falling Star, lots of passive bonuses to increase the damage of his fire skills and get extra cooldown reduction on them. His Illusion spell is honestly kind of busted. Mind Fog is very strong. His Crow ability, I don't think is quite as strong as Slow. It does do damage, but I don't think it's enough damage for it to be better than Slow, or the main thing I use it for, at least, is for the slowing effect on it. But he has good AoE damage. Both of his offensive spells are AoE, just by default, and it's good damage. He has good burn damage, while also having really strong utility. So I don't think anyone would argue that Merlin is anything other than S tier. Lastly is Morgana, another Old Faith alignment recruitment character. And personally, Morgana is one of my favorite characters in the entire game, so I may have some bias in terms of how I judge her, but I think she's extremely strong. Her Ice Thorn spell is a 4x4, which is unnaturally large for AoE spell, so she can just get extra units with it. And it can apply the Chill debuff. Chill is extremely strong. I think Chill and Shock are the strongest debuffs, and she can get it to a lot of enemies. She has Icicle Crash, which is a great single target ability, high damage. Similar to Thunderbolt, it can get enemies behind cover and apply a freeze, so it's similar to a single target stun. I just think she has a very strong kit that can debuff and help control enemies stronger than a lot of the other Arcanists, that I think she also does deserve an S tier slot as well. I do think that Morgana is a solid contender for the best Arcanist in the game when compared to Merlin. I know I may be in a minority when I say that because Merlin does have some really crazy stuff like with illusions. That's kind of the main thing I think that really carries him. But Morgana just has very strong classical debuffing in the form of directly putting status effects on them with her chills, with her freeze. She has much better single target damage because she still has her hexes, and that includes Death Hex, which is one of the strongest abilities in the game, I think. So S tier is a very solid placement for her and a potential contender for best Arcanist in the game. Now, looking at this, you'll notice I didn't put any Arcanists into C tier, and that's because I don't think any of them deserve to be there. Ector is kind of the baseline for Arcanists, and everyone else is just kind of a variation of him to some degree. None of them, I think, are worse than him, so none of them detract from what I consider the baseline for an Arcanist, so they wouldn't drop into C. And I don't think it's fair to put Ector in C either, just because he's the weakest one. I think he does his job very well. He's just sort of power crept a bit by the others. But if you're going Christian, he's kind of your only option, and he's still a very solid option. So this will be the only class tier list where there are no C tier characters. Arcanist is just a very strong, well-rounded class, and they do well to keep a good balance between all of them. And that will wrap up the video. This is it for this tier list. I'm very comfortable with this placement. Faerie Knight's kind of a weird one, but I think he's in a good spot. After this, I do plan to do a tier list for all of the characters in the game kind of compared against one another. The ranking system for that's going to be a little tricky, but I think it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.